Greetings, fellow painters! Thank you for joining me as we continue our journey into Halfchop, the most amazing new painting style to hit the internet all day today. For those of you who are new to Halfchop, Halfchop is the painting method that relies on a dark colored primer that will serve as the foundation for a backlight effect on an entire half of the miniature, as well as all of the shadow color on every other part of the model, creating a miniature with a high contrast, dynamically lit appearance. Today, we will look at how seamlessly Halfchop works with your typical Slapchop painting style as we speed paint our way through some Ghoul minions for Cthulhu Death May Die. We'll see how combining Halfchop with Slapchop is faster than your standard Slapchop approach and is faster than combining Halfchop with other painting styles. Welcome to Treehane Miniatures. Starting with a model that has been sprayed with a dark blue paint and primer in one, we begin the Slapchop process with a titanium white dry brush. Keep in mind while dry brushing that half of the model is going to appear to be receiving strong light and the other side of the model will appear to be left in shadow, having a blue hue to it. So when dry brushing the bright side of the model, which in this case is the model's right side, we're going to use a heavy dry brush technique with a circular stroke application. This will deposit more paint to the surface of the model and work as a better foundation for the translucent speed paints that we're going to apply later. On the darker half of the model, we will use a more traditional dry brush approach. We will remove more paint from the brush and apply the paint in a single downward direction. This will just catch the raised edges of the miniature and will ensure that there is more of the dark blue base color showing on this side of the miniature. After dry brushing, we'll take the same titanium white and intensify some of the highlights on the upward facing areas of the model that we want to appear brightest. We'll do this for both sides of the model, focusing mostly on areas around the face and upper torso. At the time that I decided to paint this miniature in a combined Halfchop Slapchop style, I didn't own even a single contrast or speed paint. I made a trip down to my friendly local game store to pick up this SpeedPaint starter set so that I could give Slapchop a proper try. It appears that this set contains all of the basic colors plus some extras like flesh color and a bone color. And I love that the paints come with this handy dandy painting guide that covers absolutely nothing about speed paints. I'm choosing Peachy Flesh speed paint as the base color for the Ghoul skin. And have I mentioned that I've never used speed paints before? My first rookie mistake is to apply the peachy flesh over the fur that I want to paint later with a dark gray speed paint, thinking that the light peach highlights on the fur won't affect the darker color that I'm going to apply later. I was wrong. With speed paints, you definitely want to color inside the lines, no matter how dark the following speed paint is going to be. Also, be sure to note that I'm only applying the peachy flesh color to the heavily dry brush side of the model, where the strong light would be hitting it. I'm leaving the left side of the mini untouched with this color. After getting the skin all painted up on the bright side of the model, we're going to grab some Beowulf blue speed paint and apply it to the entire left side of the model. This is where Halfchop gets its name, and this is where this method saves time over standard Slapchop. The simplistic color scheme of this miniature probably isn't the best representation of the time that can be saved with this method. The more complex a model is, the more time you'll save, since you don't have to paint all of the belts, pouches, bows, and quivers on one entire side of the miniature. On this model, I'm working the blue right up to the point that it meets the peachy flesh. If the blue overlaps the flesh just a little bit, it's no big deal because this will act as a blend between the two colors. This is instant payoff as we are just minutes into painting the Ghoul and we already have a good sense of how the finished model is going to look. Having been somewhat skeptical about speed paint up till now, I have to say that the hype is real. This stuff is fast, fun, and easy to use. I can't wait to use it on some more complex models in the future. Next up, I use a Cultist Cloak speed paint to paint the fur. Necromancer Cloak is one of my favorite old school black-gray paints, and this Occultist Cloak looks to be the speed paint version of it. As you can see, this dark gray works great at covering the lighter color that is set in the recesses, but isn't covering the peachy flesh highlights on the fur. This is something I'm going to have to address later. I'm going to use the Occultist Cloak to darken the mouth, eye sockets, and nose as well. I'll use some Satchel Brown speed paint to darken up the lower extremities and the folds and creases around the waist, ribs, and behind the ears. When using speed paint for the first time, I was somewhat alarmed by just how much more speed paint you need to use to cover an area when compared to using standard acrylic paints. I would add what I thought was an adequate amount of paint to my dry palette to fully paint one area of the model, only to find that I was having to add more paint about halfway through the process. So not only is speed paint more expensive than standard acrylic miniature paints, but you're going to go through it much faster. Seems like a win-win situation for the army painter and for the army painter, which isn't a knock on the paint's quality, but it's just an observation about the cost. And now it's time to pay for past transgressions. I'm going to take some standard acrylic uniform gray paint by the army painter and basically just dry brush it over the dark gray fur to hide the peachy flesh highlights. This is a completely unnecessary step if I had applied the paint properly in the first place. This also means that I'll need to use some light gray standard acrylic paint to highlight the fur. Even with a slight sidestep from the typical speed painting process, things are progressing very quickly. I'm going to apply some Vallejo red wash to the face around the mouth and nose and also the ears. I'm going to apply it in a thin layer just to tint the surface, and I'm not going to let it pool in the recesses. Of course, I could use the red speed paint that came with the starter set to accomplish this, but why would I do that when I have some old red wash lying around? I mean, I've already told you how expensive I think speed paint is, so now's probably a good time to tell you how cheap I am. I'm going to accomplish a task in the least expensive way possible, and this red wash does the trick nicely. A quick dot of titanium white ink will apply that final glint of light to finish off the ghoul's dark eyes. I'll use Ice Yellow by Vallejo for the teeth, leaving some separation between each tooth. I'm not going to shade or highlight this color. The dark grays and dark blues that are already present in the mouth work well against the yellowed teeth. I'd have to say that Slapchop is probably the most natural fit to go with the Halfchop style. If you'd like to see how Halfchop pairs with other painting styles, check out this playlist here. Please like and subscribe so we can continue to explore creative and interesting ways to paint our board game miniatures. Thank you for watching.